Hello, Chris. I did a video earlier today about the engine mount bolts, and you recall there were no heads. And it turns out the heads were on the top, and there had been at one time down here nuts and washers, and they were just gone. They were just rotted off, broken off. So we drilled out the engine mounts ever so slightly and installed 1/2-inch lag bolts from the top. Now we can do the same thing on this other side, of course, and I think we can do it without having to take a plank off, and we can get the other side of the engine fastened down. Now back here, even if we took this plank off, we can't get to them. We can't get the bolts in the mounts because the engine, without pulling the engine is literally sitting on top of the bolts. We wouldn't be able to get the bolts were put in, and then the engine was dropped into the mounts. So I don't think that's the end of the world that we can't get to these, because these are pinned. They're not, the engine's not going to be forward, backward, or side to side, because those are pinned into the stringer. Especially if we can hold this end of the engine down on the other side using the same method as right here. And the reason I say that's not the end of the world is your pressure, your thrust, your propeller is where it's going to thrust is on the transmission. And so we started looking at the transmission bolts, and there's another short video that Jeff took, but the transmission bolts on this side you can see aren't really doing much of anything. You can raise, on both sides you can raise the engine up and down. So to save this stringer, what we're looking at doing is actually chiseling out all the rot, treating it, putting just a piece of plywood with wax paper on the bottom to seal it off, and pouring that cavity with epoxy, and then re-drilling and re-bolting is what we've got in mind on that stringer. We can do the same thing on the other side without having to remove we may have to remove a plank. If we don't know the condition on the other side, we just know that we don't know the condition of the stringer. As you can see, this side's got some rot in it. We probably ought to at least put a couple holes in the bottom with hole saws so that we can see and inspect and take our bolts in and out and pour it. And that would also allow us, if there's rot over there, to deal with the rot. And then we can plug those holes back with the butt block on the back side. A butt block being what we're talking about here. You know, if we were to make a couple-inch diameter hole in this, or in a plank like this, right underneath this area on the other side, then we can easily put a 2-inch plug back in, have a butt block back behind it, and it won't leak. You know, it'll never be a problem. So I'm suggesting that we attack these mounting bolts for the transmission. Number one, while it's easy on this side, and then get this transmission bolted down to where if you put a lot of stress on the boat, which I know you don't intend to put a lot of stress on the boat, but if you had a situation where you had to, where that transmission doesn't get ripped out of the stringer. The other thing we found that's of interest is this appears to be this line goes up to the stove, and unless this is a fuel oil stove, I thought this might be a propane line, and as you can see, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it rubbed against the hub right here, and it's almost rubbed open. So we haven't been able to trace this out. This goes up behind the wall, and perhaps went to a propane tank up on the deck. But I'm going to take a look at the stove in the morning and see if maybe that's a fuel oil stove, which I don't think would be very pleasant to cook on, but I'm going to check out and see. So anyhow, and this seems to be a fuel line from the tank to the engine, but this one seems to be a propane line right here. And like I say, it's got a notch cut in it right here. So that could be very dangerous. We'll investigate that for you as well.